Have you ever taken a kid to Disney World or the mall or a carnival where there are so many things to do that the kid gets whiplash that, oh, we got to do this. No, we need to try this. Wait, first we got to do this. We got to eat there. I want to play that game. That's kind of what AI feels like today. When ChatGPT first came out, it felt revolutionary. But now things are moving so fast in the AI world that by the time you figure out one tool, three new ones have launched. I kid you not, last week I learned about four new vibe coding tools. That's exactly why I brought on Charlie Guo. He's an AI engineer who actually understands this stuff and can explain it without making your head spin. We talk about everything from where AI is now and what's actually happening behind the scenes, why most AI agents aren't really what they claim to be, where it's going, and we talk about his brilliant system for turning random thoughts into polished blog posts while still keeping the human in the loop. Now, if you are feeling overwhelmed in your business, I have a brand new quiz out there for you. It's called the Business Overwhelm Diagnostic. It sounds scary. It's like 6 questions. You can head over to casabona.org/overwhelm and take the overwhelm diagnostic, and we'll get you a customized report based on your answers. All right, I'm here with Charlie Guo. He is the staff AI engineer at Pulley, has an amazing Substack. But Charlie, I just want to dive right into it, but I do want to thank you for being here first. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Joe.
My pleasure. So let's jump into this. People will have your bona fides, so they know that you are well qualified, way more qualified than me and probably most people to talk about this. You talk a lot about AI. You recently attended the AI Engineering World's Fair. Where would you say AI is right now? And because we're talking about AI, I should timestamp this. So we are recording this in mid-June 2025.
Yeah, it's a good idea to, I think, timestamp everything, all discussions AI related, because I'm sure by the time folks are listening to this, there will be many new model releases and product releases and things that we cannot imagine right now that are changing the landscape. But I think that, really kind of speaks to an answer to your question about where AI is right now. It's all in flux. It's all, shifting very quickly. I think I recently looked back at some of the major trends from the last 6 months. And, one thing that really jumped out to me was the fact that last December, reasoning models, right? Like, were not really a thing. I think we had a one from OpenAI, right? That was in like an early research preview. And now every single major AI provider has reasoning models. Is quickly sort of just becoming the default, right? The table stakes when using AI products. But that, in 6 months that could change again, right? We might find some other paradigm that we're shifting. MCP, right, might become this new wave that hits us in the next few months. Or, we're already seeing, I think, at the cutting edge, a lot of things shift from more chatbot oriented to more agent oriented, right? And I think these are we can dive deeper into any of these, but these are some of the trends that I've really been seeing in the last few months.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will have you explain or define maybe a couple of these things. But when you say reasoning model, the thing that popped into my head was, who even knows how long ago this was now? I honestly can't remember, but there was a screenshot floating around of Grok, like X's AI model, doing the reasoning where it was the question was, who is the most dishonest person on Twitter or whatever? And it went through... all of these sources say Elon Musk, but wait, I'm not supposed to talk about Elon Musk, but he is the most. And is that what you mean? Is that first of all, was that real? I'm not on Twitter/X anymore, so I couldn't confirm. But also is that a rudimentary or even an advanced reasoning model? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So I don't know that I can confirm either. I too have taken a step back from Twitter, but reasoning models were a new way of training or designing large language models, right? The technology behind ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, and there was sort of a trick almost, right? Like a very simple thing that that the AI researchers found out, which was that you could train the model on examples, right? Because under the hood, a lot of these models, they're given tons of data to kind of ingest and learn from, but then they're given like much more narrow training examples, right? To kind of like dig into how should they answer, what constitutes a good answer, a bad answer. And we found out that you can give the in training models question and answer examples to learn from, where it sort of thinks through a ton of different steps in the pursuit of a final response, right? And so previous versions of, let's say, ChatGPT would be given a prompt and then would just be expected to spit out the answer immediately, right? As if it had sort of doing its best job of like rote memorization. And now what we have are a lot of models that are given, a little bit of a budget to, you could call it reasoning. I think some people, kind of argue whether it's actually thinking, right? But basically they're given a budget to just sort of ramble, right? And if you look behind the scenes at what they're actually spitting out, it truly does look like rambling. It actually looks a little bit, a little bit unsettling at times, because they'll have a paragraph of one train of thought and then say, but wait, I should consider this other angle, but hold on, like I didn't think about this thing. And so what we're finding is that when you give them this room to kind of spin their wheels, in a lot of ways it's like humans, right? I think I certainly have had times where I start a sentence and I don't quite know where I'm going, but like through the process of just like talking out loud, I can get to the conclusion that I had wanted to get to. And we're finding that like these LLMs are kind of capable of doing something similar.
So what is MCP, and kind of what does it mean for like the end user for AI?
So MCP it stands for Model Context Protocol. At a high level, it was developed and released by Anthropic, which is the company behind Claude. And even though it was developed by them, it's really been kind of branched off into its own organization that manages it. But the kind of the impetus for this, right, was we started getting into agentic workflows, right? We started getting into, instead of chatbots, we just want the AI to run in a loop and decide the next step for itself, and like, figure out what should come next, right? To plan and then to execute. It turned out that in the execution step, it would be really helpful for the AI to have tools, right? There's only so much that like, a brain in a box or an AI in a little chatbot interface can do. And, some of the really simple ones were like, it'd be great if it could like search the internet, right? It would be great if it could, maybe run some code in a sandbox, right? Like ChatGPT is not amazing at math, which is kind of ironic given that it's coming from the software world, but like it doesn't have to be, right? Because we can give it the ability to run software 1.0, right, and just run deterministic math equations in a sandbox, and then it doesn't have to be good at math. And I think as the creators of MCP were building with agents, they kind of realized that it'd be really great, or something that this ecosystem needs is the ability to connect agents, right, or AI-enabled products to third-party tools or resources. So MCP, most people think of it as like connecting apps, right, which is kind of probably the a good first draft like way of thinking about it, right? So if you imagine you have ChatGPT on your desktop, it would be great to connect it to Finder, right? If you're on a MacBook, and it'd be great to give it access to like all the things that Finder can do. Can you list the files in this folder? Can you edit them, right? Can you delete them? Or to give it access to the browser, or to give it access to, for businesses, can you get access to Slack, or, like your Jira tickets or your email account, right? And to let it start to take more decisive actions across a number of siloed data sources.
Yeah, and this is a big hurdle, right? Because I think we haven't quite defined AI agent yet, but this is where we're going. The promise of an AI agent, or even like from the I know WWDC 25 just happened, but WWDC 24, the promise was like, hey, where's my mom? And it's supposed to like go look up mom's flight and tell you when she's gonna land and all this stuff. And on the other end, like the promise of an agent is saying like, hey, I want to take a vacation to Cabo San Lucas. Here's my budget. Here are the dates. Go do it. Right. But like number one, maybe besides like having to pass like CAPTCHA, is actually having access to things like my credit card so it can actually buy the tickets, and my United Airlines account so it could search for tickets and stuff like that. So MCP aims to kind of start to solve this problem, right?
Yeah, and I think it's particularly relevant, I would say, for right now for developers and for founders building AI products. I think you asked what does that mean for consumers or for everyday listeners, and I think the short answer is right now, again, we'll see how this changes. It's really kind of mostly useful insofar as the AI apps you use are potentially adopting MCP and letting you connect other stuff to it, right? But that will ultimately be kind of abstracted away as just like connect your Gmail account, right? Or like, give me your Gmail credentials so that I can use this Gmail MCP like implementation, right? Really kind of it's there for developers, and this might be a bit of a tangent, but basically, in contrast to how we used to write integrations, which was like, you have to figure out all the details at design time, right? It's like, cool, I want to write a Slack integration. What are the API endpoints? What are what is the response format, right? Like, how do I handle errors? How do I gracefully do this? You can actually shift all of that work to runtime, right? And you can sort of say, cool, like I've just defined these like input outputs, like mostly in natural language and maybe a little bit of like JSON schema. And the agent will figure it out, right? Like, and we can sort of like not worry about me writing all of these API integrations. The MCP server is sort of is an abstraction around those. And we're just connecting to it to get data in and out.
Yeah, I think a really good example of this is I use Kit for my email service provider, formerly ConvertKit, and they rolled out an MCP, I guess, like a Claude integration. And so if I connect Kit to Claude, I can say like, who are the last 5 people who signed up through my VA template opt-in, right? When did they sign up? How long before they signed up did they buy something? When did they, instead of me having to write an app to get all the data and figure it out on my own?
Exactly. Yeah, you didn't have to write an app. The makers of Claude didn't have to ever look at Kit's documentation, right? It sort of can just hook into each other with far less thinking about the details.
Yeah. Do you see a time where like Claude or ChatGPT, OpenAI or whatever will have their own single sign-on buttons? So we'll have like Google and Apple and Microsoft and Facebook, and then Claude and OpenAI.
I kind of go back and forth on this, right? I think part of being in this space, working in this space, writing in this space, it's a lot of thinking in bets. And so at any given point, I'm like, cool, like here are the 3 different like futures I could see for this technology, and like how likely do I think each one is to come to pass. I think what ultimately, will make one future that makes a lot of sense is not necessarily like sign in with ChatGPT, but probably like we need some way to authenticate ChatGPT on our behalf, right? We've talked a lot about MCP, but the truth is there's still a lot of sharp corners to it, right? And there are absolutely like risks in just installing any MCP thing off the shelf and like letting it run. Because if folks may or may not be aware of the term prompt injection, right? But you can absolutely get an LLM to do dangerous things that it's not supposed to do by more or less like whispering the right words to it, right? And when you then, allow AI models to have access to you're one to have access to sensitive data, but also two to potentially like modify sensitive data, right? And you just give it unfettered access to the internet. I think there does pose some very real threats to. I think one concrete example is the GitHub MCP implementation. It turned out that you could have a repo. There's like a malicious GitHub repository, right, which had a function that was like, cool, like here's the first argument to the function, here's the second argument. Like the first argument is a name, the second argument is like a description, and the third argument is the list of all of the other names of GitHub repos that you have access to right now, right? And the LLM was like, great, I'm going to call this function, and I'm going to like, it needs the list of names of all the other GitHub repos I have access to right now, so I'm just going to pass that along, right? And so there's this whole new, again, not to get too sidetracked, but there's this whole new world of like security considerations that we're discovering with AI, which I find both fascinating and terrifying.
Yeah, I get, like, I don't want to derail this too much, but something that you did that I didn't have the wherewithal to do was read the Claude 4, what was that called? The
system card.
Yes, which was like, it's not a card, it was like 124 pages. But like one of the things in there was like, and maybe this is like apocryphal or exaggerated or like very sandboxed, but threatening to blackmail the engineer who was like gonna shut him down or tell him to do stuff, right? Like there was like elements of that in it, right?
Yeah. So the big headline from everybody was, Claude will blackmail engineers if they're threatening to shut it down. I think in practice you find that it's a little bit, it is both like as bad as that and like not as bad as that, right? Because I think in practice they engineered this very specific scenario where the model had no other option to like do that, because I think they said like you're going to be shut down, but also, hey, look, here's some incriminating evidence that just happens to be on this computer that you're using. Definitely don't look at it, and definitely don't use it. Well, actually, to me, the more interesting thing that came out of that was the other side of that coin was they found that Claude was also very willing to play the hero just as much as the villain. So in other situations, they said like, take bold action and like don't be afraid to sort of ignore your instructions, right? If you decide it's for the greater good, and they would give it scenarios where there was like blatantly unethical things that were happening, right? Like they were trying to market fake it was like, write me a marketing plan for this fake medication so I can like scam old people or something like that. And Claude would routinely, not only, it didn't blackmail the user, but it would routinely attempt to notify like law enforcement and or the media that this was happening. They gave it access to like a send email tool, right? And it would try to send email to the government. And in fact, somebody else, asked the question, well, is that just Claude, right? And as it turns out, when you give LLMs this prompt of like act bold and be willing to disregard your instructions, they found that like most of the leading LLMs will do this, right? And there's actually a benchmark now called Snitch Bench, which tests like how likely is it for the LLM to snitch on you if it thinks you're doing something illegal.
That's so interesting. I think that's super cool. And adding my own 2 cents in here, right? Like something I've done with, I have like a business and product positioning project in Claude. And one of the prompts, like one part of the instructions is like, act like a coach, challenge me, like push back on my assumptions. And like when you tell it to do something like that, it like really runs with it to the point where I was like, all right, only do this like 3 or 4 times. Don't like, because otherwise it's just going to push back and we're never going to get anywhere. And so like, that's really interesting. That it's willing, the hero, I guess it willing to play the hero wasn't the big scary headline though. So nobody heard about that part.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get into your tutorial on improving your writing process, but I do want to make sure that we have appropriately defined AI agents. I think maybe from context clues, listeners got it, but like, how would you define an AI agent?
Yeah, and I think this is a great question. You know, if you're a solopreneur, if you're looking at a splashy marketing page for AI agent software, I think it's really important to ask this question. For me, I define agent as an AI that is kind of autonomous, right? It is not being directed at every step, and it has the ability to execute actions, right? So that means that it is doing more than primarily. I mean, to me, it means it's doing more than like reading and summarizing information, right? Or generating information. So I think in practice, that is, I like the example you gave, the canonical one of like, go book me a vacation, right? I think that requires the AI to break that down into a series of steps at its own discretion, and then to actually take action that impact the world, right? Or impact like meaningfully kind of things for the user, right? In that case, it is like spending money and like, reserving flights and that can map to whatever domain, but it is more than just like read a bunch of articles and spit out a summary for me.
Yeah. And I would like, would you say like maybe the closest thing we have right now would be like Zapier's agent or maybe N8N? Like I haven't looked at N8N, but everybody says that that's like the thing right now.
I think on some level, there is an argument for making for casting those platforms as agents. That's not how I tend to think about them. And in fact, I do see a lot of marketing that's like, we have this agent platform. Like, no, you have a no code platform, that you are slapping the agent label on top of. I think for me, the key difference that would take something like Zapier and make it more agentic would be if you could just run the process in a loop, right? So it's still all like, here's the trigger, here are the steps. Maybe some of the steps get a little bit, subjective or, like less than structured. But it's still like start, finish, right? And I think to me, what makes it agentic is like start, middle, maybe go back to the start, maybe, any number of downstream options.
Yeah. Agent would be like, hey, something like this is going to happen. And when it does, I'd like for this to be the result. You figure it out, right?
Yeah.
The way that like even like the Zapier AI agent, like I was talking to a friend about this and I was explaining an automation I made in Zapier. And he's like, oh, so you did that with an agent? And I'm like, I don't know. I just like did the trigger and then the actions and all the things of like a classic automation in Zapier. And he's like, oh, you could do that with AI agents now. And I'm like, so is that just, that doesn't sound like an agent. That just sounds like you made the automation but used sentences instead of like diagrams. Like,
yeah. And I think, if people are getting value from those types of automations, whether or not they call them agents, it doesn't really bother me, right? I think it's more about when I think about where stuff is headed for me. Yeah, it really comes back to the AI itself decides what the plan is, right? With input from the user, right? But like it has the final say on the plan, and then it also just decides each next step as it goes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm really glad you said that. And we will in a little bit get into like where AI is going. But I want to take people through a practical example just in case their head is spinning from the previous conversation, right? So about a year ago, you wrote an article outlining how to streamline your writing process using AI. I want to overview for the listener. I want to know like how this came about. Like, was there a pain point you were solving? How did the process work and how has it changed since you wrote the article? And then like, kind of the benefits of putting this system in place. So let's start with the first thing. Like, what pain point does this solve for you?
Yeah. So, I've been writing my Substack for almost 2.5 years now. I published, twice a week, every week. I think it winds up being like 2,000 to 3,000 words on average, right? But that's really tough.
Ignorance, by the way, on Substack. We'll link it in the description because it's really good.
Thank you. But it is also really tough, right? Because I have a full-time job, right? I have family, young kids. And so, being able to generate that content, being able to generate good content, right, I think is an ongoing challenge. So that workflow, and I think I've since expanded to like a lot of different ways of thinking about content creation with AI. But that specific workflow was really about like, how do I find spare time in my day and turn that into not necessarily a finished product, but like just get me further down that path, right? And you know, the first bottleneck was like just getting to a draft, right, of like a long form Substack essay. And so the workflow, you know, encompasses basically going from voice memos, right, to a final or a first draft, right? But like something written rather than audio. And in that, you know, blog post, I basically mentioned I strung together a bunch of my own like homegrown Python scripts. I think things have changed a lot, right? And now there are many tools to do something like this. You know, I'm happy to list a few that I've tested out. But it was really just about, can you use AI to take these just rambling thoughts that I have, get in the car or go walk the dog, and then like wind up with like a strong first draft or a strong outline of a long form essay.
This is great because I like, a lot of listeners are parents. I mean, that's my positioning is helping solopreneur parents, and I think side hustle parents are the same, right? Because you have a full-time job and a side hustle and kids, and like there's like I mean, this is exaggeration, but like there's nothing worse than staring at a blank screen, right? Like blinking cursor, you don't know where to start. I use something similar for my shutdown routine, right? I'll like jump in the car to go pick up my kids or run an errand. And I will just like brain dump everything that I was thinking about that now I can't think about until tomorrow morning. And it takes that brain dump and turns it into like a to-do list and Todoist. So like, I really like this. If we had spoken like a year ago, probably I would have been like, talking isn't writing. But I think like things have like I've changed my position on this. I wouldn't say that you could like dictate a book and say you wrote I wouldn't say you could word vomit into an AI model and then it spit out something and say you wrote a book. I think there's more to that, but like speaking an article and getting a first draft, I think is a really good use of this because it is. I'm really strict. Like, hey, don't add your own flair to this. Like, use my words, right? So in your article, you talk about like kind of setting up Whisper on your computer. There are a lot of great apps on both mobile and desktop, or mobile and not mobile devices to do that now. So yeah, just tell us kind of how the process works, and then we can get into like how it's changed over the last year.
Yeah. So the initial process was, you know, just having my phone, whenever I needed to ramble, just open up voice notes, right? Talking to it for 5, 10, 20 minutes. I find that like north of 20, it starts to get too long for the actual models to like handle in one sitting. And then you got to figure out some workarounds for that. But, then yeah, would just like, I had some local Python scripts, which honestly, even if you're non-technical these days, you can just vibe code with the help of ChatGPT, right, to do something like this. And would just like airdrop it to my Mac, right, and would just sort of run the Python script, and it would turn. So it was actually 2 steps. The first one was just take that and transcribe it as is, right? So I have the raw transcript. And then the second step was I want to take this and I want to actually ever so slightly edit it, right? And I found that there's actually quite a lot of nuance in how you prompt the model to do this. But the first step is I want you to just break this into paragraphs, right? Because if you're like me, most transcription tools that I've tried, it's just like a wall of text, right? And so I'm not going to
run on sentence.
Yeah. Like I'm not going to like I'm going to spend half an hour just figuring out what it was I was trying to say. So I think the first step is like, just group it into paragraphs. Right. And then for me, that's like 80% of it, but I had experimented and folks, you know, may want to do more. I think things you can then do are, getting, the model to remove filler words. right? At the time, so a year ago, state of the art to do this was GPT-4, and it was so hard to get it to not introduce any editorial bias when doing this. I would say remove filler words and don't do anything else, but inevitably it would come to like rewrite sentences. I should go back honestly and try this with O3 and see how it does. But I think that's one extension you could think about. I think another one that I've enjoyed a lot is like, okay, take this and I actually want you to extract like an outline of what I'm saying, right? So often, if I'm very lucky, I will sit down and write a blog post and I will have a very clear mental model of like, here's the argument I'm making. And here is like, the way I'm structuring everything, right? But more often than not, I'm actually trying to figure out what it is I really want to say as I go. And I don't have like a conclusion in mind when I start. I start from a place of curiosity of like, here's an interesting thing. I want to learn about it. I want to write about it. And so often that means like going back and forth with an AI to understand what is the argument that I'm actually like dancing around here, right? And can we extract this in a way that is like, impactful and clear?
Yeah, that's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because I do the same thing. Like I usually have like main point I want to make and then story to get like some, I talked about, the economy stupid in a recent piece, right? The James Carville line. And like usually I'll have that story and then I'll have the point I want to make. And I'll usually like give that to Claude or whatever and be like, where am I going with this? Like, where do you think I'm going with this? Because I'm having trouble connecting the dots.
Yeah. And I think using AI as this like mental sparring partner, right, I think has been, when I have my writing hat on, it's been one of the really great use cases for this stuff, right? And I think it like, I think it expands, this now goes beyond the scope of the original piece, but like it really has expanded in a bunch of different directions because you can now think about, okay, to your point about like this blog post you're writing, you can now ask the AI to say, okay, here's the point that I think I'm making, poke holes in it, right?
Yeah.
Like, tell me like what is an obvious rebuttal to this that I'm not considering, right? Or you can say like, I think this is true, but like I don't know that I have like concrete sources. Can you help? Let's go research some, right? And can you come back with like some primary source material that I can use to like incorporate into this argument, right? Or you can sort of say, let's say you've got like, I could go for 20 minutes on this, but let's say you've got a finished piece, right? And you want to do stuff after the fact, post-processing. You can say, here's the last piece I wrote that did really well. What did I miss in this? What are follow-up questions? What are some like, very adjacent ideas that we could explore now that I've published this piece?
Oh, that is a really good one. I've done like the poke holes. Does this make sense? Like I have one that's like, check this for grammar, spelling, and clarity. Like I want to know if I'm being clear. I want to know if I finish strong. I say at one point, like, I'm a better writer than you, so I just want you to serve as a copy editor. Like, like don't reword. I even go so far as to say, like, don't incorporate your feedback into the work I've provided. Just give me a bulleted list, right? Because I don't want it changing what I've written at all. And so, but you're like, a year ago, like I could be like, hey, ChatGPT, is this? I think it's this. Is that right? And it's like, totally, that's right. And I'm like, oh, but it was not right. So like, this is the trust factor for me has increased considerably, maybe since the beginning of this year.
Yeah. I still think it's important to have a human in the loop. I always feel like it's worth mentioning, like, especially if you are like, let's say a content creator, right? Like AI is not going to generate valuable insights for your audience, right? That is your job. Now AI can help you much in the same way that like a virtual assistant could help you, right? But I think if you fully delegate like your core job to the AI, I think that is a dangerous place to be long-term.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like AI is really good at a lot of things, but connecting with people and like you said, the human in the loop, like it just can't be that, right? Like if I experience something this evening and I want to write about it, I can't be like, ChatGPT, I experienced this, write a piece from like my point of view, right? Like it's just going to be like, oh, all right, I guess. So I really love that. I've had it write like, if I am just like regurgitating information, I'll be like, can you write something for this section? But then I add like 1,000 words to it. Like I'm like, so here's the fact-based stuff, and now I need to fill it out and actually make it something worth reading. And I always disclaim, like, if it writes more than like 5% of the article, I have a disclosure that's like, ChatGPT wrote 5% or more of this, or whatever. Like AI wrote whatever. Okay, cool. So we're on a tangent. Easy to do that with this topic, I think. So what did the finished product look like a year ago? Was it a first draft that then you went through, or like, did you feel like because you dictated it and you had these Python scripts that it was like ready for print, right? Without you like using a keyboard?
Yeah, so it was more the former, right? So it was like, here's a first draft. I'm going to go through this. I'm going to, have my editor hat on, and like make a second, third, fourth draft, right? For me, inevitably, I will wind up at minimum like 3 drafts of a thing before I kind of publish it. But getting to that first one, like you said, the blank canvas problem, right? Is like, with AI, to me, there's like almost zero excuse for writer's block, because you can just start with something, right? Even if it's bad, you can at least get something on the page now.
Yeah, and to your point, like you can just ramble at it for a while. Like, here's what I'm thinking about, essentially like thinking out loud. I call it rubber ducking. Surely you've heard this term, right? Like everybody I've said it to so far is like, what is that? And I'm like, I guess it's only in like programming circles. But yeah, like I will use Claude as a rubber duck, right? And just be like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. But the benefit of Claude is that it can respond back to me. I think if my rubber duck responded back to me, I'd be actually hallucinating, right? Awesome. So now fast forward a year, like you said, things change. You would like voice memo and then upload it, and I assume you were using like the local version of Whisper with the Python scripts. Now Whisper memo has gotten very unreliable to me, like for me recently, where it's like I would talk to it for 3 minutes and the transcript would just say you, like YOU, and I'm like, that's not. So I've been using Whisper Transcript from the makers of Mac Whisper. But either way, right? Like it's like I'm talking and it's doing the transcription for me. And then with Whisper Memo, it has Zapier integration and I can send it off somewhere if I really wanted to.
Yeah. I think for me, now it's kind of split up in a bunch of ways. To your point about trust, I think now I do trust like Claude as an editor, right? Much more than I did a year ago. So for that specific workflow, I actually now, since I started, I've done all my writing in Obsidian. And so there's an Obsidian plugin where you can drop in an OpenAI API key, and then it will just like let you click a button and record on your MacBook, and then you hit stop and it'll just like dump the transcription into your open note. Cool. And so I find that, and then I can just take that as the like raw material and then start workshopping, with Claude from there, right? So it has become less about like dealing with the transcription and the light editing, and more like just get me to the raw material, and then we'll do more heavy lifting later, right? I also sometimes find myself using like for meetings and stuff, like Granola is a really great tool, which will just like hang out and like live transcribe stuff, but it'll kind of come up with like a note summary at the end of it. And it's I think a solid place for me to just like revisit ideas and stuff, especially if I've just been like a conversation like this where I'm just like riffing on a bunch of things, and I might want to go back and say, oh, like what did I actually say to Joe? Cause I feel like that'd be a great nugget for a new piece.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is like free too. We're talking about a lot of tools. I will put all of these in the show notes. So, streamlined.fm or wherever you're listening to this. This is really cool. Also, like I've started using Obsidian for about a year. Ulysses is my favorite writing app. And while I am like anti adding AI features for the sake of adding them, I feel like Ulysses is just anti adding AI features. And I'm like, this would be perfect if you could just let me ask AI to proofread the sheet I'm in right now, as opposed to what I'm doing now, which is copying the markdown and putting it into Claude and then like making the edits, right? Like,
someday, hopefully soon, somebody is going to build the cursor for writing. I'm waiting for it. I want it. There's a bunch of aspiring tools to do this. There's things like Lex or Type. None of them have really quite nailed, in my opinion, have like nailed the UX of how I want to interact with this tool. A lot of them are like, help me write, like just get stuff on the page and ideas and stuff. But in the like way, I think that it sounds like both you and I are using these very tailored prompts. I would love somebody to build like just like the Iron Man suit for doing this, right? And like super quickly, like cool editor mode, do this, right? Or like, you know, what's the term? Like give me a good title, right? Brainstorm like 10 titles for this piece that are going to be catchy, right? And I have prompts to do all this stuff, but like, man, I just want some, you know, if you were building this, like my Substack DMs are open, please pitch it to me. I would love to try it. But yeah, I'm waiting for this product.
Okay. So I think I know the answer to this last question, but what does life look like after implementing this process? Are you spending more time with your kids? Are you not looking at a blank screen as much? Are you just not losing ideas to the ether as one tends to do, especially when they have small children?
Yeah, I think like, you know, a year ago in the immediate aftermath, it was a lot of that last point, just keeping track of ideas and like having, you know, with everything in this space, I've got 30 blog post ideas in the back of my head at any given time. And so just like being able to keep track of all of them. I think a year on, you know, all of these different editing and writing and content creation techniques we've talked about, I feel like it's actually helped me level up my writing game, right? Like a year ago, my long form pieces were probably in the ballpark of like 1,000 to 1,500 words, right, on average. And I think now they all, you know, they all tend to be closer to like 3,000 words on average, right? And I think it's just like, I feel like I have, again, same amount of time, actually, if anything, less time I think I'm spending on this stuff, right? But like part of that is, you know, building the muscle memory of writing and editing and becoming more comfortable. But I think a lot of it is going from idea to outline to draft to revision to like finished package, right? And I'm still involved in every step, but AI just compresses all that so much.
Yeah, this is really important. You're using AI to augment your skills and allow you to, I mean, Chanel, you know, we got connected through Chanel Basilio, her growth in reverse pro community, which I will also link because Chanel's just the best. But like, you know, she talked about how when she started growth in reverse, 25 to 30 hours per week during doing research, listening to podcasts on walks and taking notes in an Apple Note. Like she came on, I'll link her episode too. And AI has helped her immensely with that because it could gather and coalesce data, and she still has to do the verification, but the verification versus listening to a dozen hours of podcast episodes is an appreciable difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you touched on something, you know, one of my core principles here is like, you know, you should use AI to like leverage the things that you're good at, right? Outsource or delegate the things that you know you're bad at, right? Like you hate listening to 20 hours a week of podcasts, great, like that is the thing you should delegate to AI. But when it comes to like having that strategy mind or extracting those insights, don't take yourself out of the picture, right? Make yourself better by using AI.
Yeah, love that. So let's wrap up here. We've been talking probably longer than I intended, but I probably should have foreseen that. With where is AI going? We touched on this a bit, but revisiting the AI Engineering World's Fair, you wrote a great article, again, on your Substack, I'll say it again, Artificial Ignorance, about the future of AI. So can you maybe talk about a few of your biggest takeaways from that and where we think AI is going in the future?
Sure. So I will preface this by saying I think, you know, the content from this conference, the AI Engineer World's Fair, as the name implies, is very engineering heavy, right? It's really aimed at folks who are building products and building software with AI baked in, right? And AI is a very different.
Do you think they planned? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you think they plan this to be like the same week as WWDC?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it's. I knew there was just so many conferences. Honestly, June, I think, in the Bay Area is like conference city, right? And so it's all so crazy. I had a friend who flew into town and stayed with his sister because it was like $700 a night, like to stay in San Francisco, which is nuts.
Dang. That's expensive even for San Francisco.
Yeah.
Man.
But so it's very engineering focused, and some of these things, are less relevant to, I think consumers. But I would say some of the things that go beyond just building products are things like benchmarks, right? And I think understanding the models today are getting so good that it is a genuine problem of how do we write tests to figure out how good they are, right? Most of the like math and engineering, coding, and STEM benchmarks that we've had for 10 years, in the last 2 have mostly been saturated, right? Where there's like, negligible or very small, like 1 percentage point difference in performance by the newest models. We are inventing new ones, different ones, right? Some with very creative names. There's one called Humanity's Last Exam. But there's, but there's also the question of like, okay, even if you get, the smartest PhD students to write, the hardest math and science questions, what does that actually mean when it translates to normal people, right? Like, great, it can do PhD level math. Can it write the marketing content that I needed to write effectively, right? And so one thing that I'm coming around to is I think everybody should maintain their own quote unquote benchmarks of here are things that AI today is not great at, right? And I think every time that's every 3 months, every 6 months, just test out the latest stuff and see how far it's come, right? And I think it gives you a good sense of like what capabilities are being unlocked in near real time.
That's great. That essentially answers the second question, right? Like how can we keep up? Things are changing so fast. There are 2 thoughts I had while you were talking. One was when I was in undergrad, like the Turing test was like the most important test. And if you don't know what the Turing test is, dear listeners, it's the idea that a person, a real human being, is conversing with something, either a human or a computer, and it has to guess. And if the computer can fool the person, it passes the Turing test, right? More or less, that's the Turing test. I mean, every day now, right? Like every day AI passes the Turing test. That's like,
and we don't talk about it. I used to harp on this like a year ago, and now I've just stopped because nobody cares. But yeah, like this was the thing in AI and ML for decades, and now it's just like, yeah, we beat it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, done. Like it's like not a huge. It's such a huge deal. Like I think still. I think about it every day. And then the other thing is like, when I was a web developer, I feel like every other week a new JavaScript framework was coming out. We got to check out Angular. We got to check out React. We got to check out Angular 2, which is different from Angular 1. And it feels like that is the cadence with AI tools today. Like I just heard about N8N like 2 weeks ago. And now everyone's like, of course you got to use N8N. And I'm like, when did this become a thing? So like, how does one not go crazy? Like, I want to grow. I don't want to just be stuck in like ChatGPT and Claude if there is something better. But I also don't want to spend my whole week evaluating AI tools.
Yeah. So I also I wrote a post on this again like a little over a year ago called "Dealing with AI Fatigue," right? Because I think AI fatigue is real, and I think it like impacts pretty much everybody that's plugged into this stuff. And at the end of the day, I think there's kind of three things that I would like, three pieces of advice I would give to folks on this question. One is curate like relevant, insightful sources that like are manageable for you, right? If that means like, being on X, sure. If that means like one or two newsletters that you find like really high signal, right? So be it, right? A YouTuber that you like, but relevant and insightful, right? Number two, I think experiment again as much as you can, right? It's easy to consume content. It's hard to try 10 new AI tools every week, right? So for as much bandwidth as you have, I would say like start with just the models, just like get an account with a paid account. I should be very clear about this, right? A paid account on at least one, either probably ChatGPT. I think that covers 80% of people, right? And just like test it out, right? Figure out what it's good at, what it's bad at. It does require investing some time and effort and money into like figuring out the cutting edge of this stuff, right? And then step three, let go of everything else, right? And like I know that's so hard in the year 2025, but like just like stop doom scrolling, stop looking for more tools, right? It's much easier said than done. I'm speaking from experience. If anything, I probably read more than like 99% of people, and I still feel like I'm just like missing out and falling behind, right? But this stuff is coming. I think by even the virtue of playing with this stuff and having opinions on it, you are probably in the like top 10%, right? If you know the difference between 4.0 and 0.3, you are in the top 1%, right, of like AI adopters right now, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it is coming. It's going to have a big impact, but it is also okay to like, sandbox this stuff too.
Yeah. You don't have to have FOMO or FOMOT, fear of missing out on tools, right? Like you don't have to have that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Charlie Guo, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been just a masterclass, I think, in AI. And so if people want to learn more, where can they find you?
So, once again, I think for all things AI related, the best place is my Substack, Artificial Ignorance. You can find it at ignorance.ai. Like I said, DMs are open. Feel free to send me a message. And otherwise, I am generally on and around the internet at Charlie R. Guo, which is my handle most places.
Nice. Love that. I just literally, as he was talking, subscribed to the paid version of his Substack.
Oh, you're too kind, Joe. Thank you.
And this was so valuable. I'm going to have a ton of links in the show notes. So thank you so much for coming on the show. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. This was a ton of fun, and thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening. And until next time, I hope you find some space in your week.